Hey, I've got a question for you today. Have you ever asked God, who do you want me to reach in my life? God, who are the people I'm called to reach? Now, you've heard of missionaries. As a church, we support 26 full-time missionaries around the world in places like Turkey and Kenya and Guatemala, all around. And those people know they're called to a specific people group. Is that possible for you and me? Well, I want to give you a scriptural precedent. Here in Galatians 2, Paul is in the middle of kind of giving his credentials. Keep in mind, he's writing to a church where false teachers have come in. He's correcting the church back to the truth. And so chapter 2 is a lot of him saying, here's why I am a credible source of the gospel. Jesus appeared to me. Then I met James, one of the disciples. And in time, I've gotten to not only meet, but become close friends with each of the disciples, Peter, John, James, Andrew, etc. And they have each validated my ministry as an apostle. So Paul's in the middle of saying all that. And he says in verse 9, James, Peter, and John, who were known as pillars of the church, recognized the gift God had given me. So he's establishing his credibility. And they accepted Barnabas, my co-worker. They encouraged us to keep preaching to the Gentiles, non-Jewish people, even while they continued their work to the Jews or the Jewish people. So this is very interesting. Paul had, in modern day language, a clear market demographic. He knew that he was called to Gentiles. Even though he was from a Jewish background himself, he had this laser focus that God had called him to preach the gospel to non-Jewish people. Similarly, James, Peter, and John had a very clear sense from the Spirit of God that they were called to preach the gospel to Jewish people. And so each of them would pray and say, God, which city are we supposed to go to next? Which community? And when they'd get to that community, Paul would go to the Gentiles, and these others would go to the Jewish people there, and each preaching the same good news of Jesus. Now, the reason I share that is I think it'd be an interesting thing for you to pray. In my life, I've prayed that, and God has given me a really crystal clear calling, and that is to reach families in the suburbs surrounding Indianapolis, to reach as many people as possible, but families especially, because we're to reach them and then we're to train up the next generation. And so these cities around Indianapolis that are growing and young families are moving in, that's really my sense of calling. And as a church here at Connection Point, that's our primary thing. God's also given us a digital vision. Many of you don't live in Indiana, and you benefit through Daily Hope from what God's called us to do digitally. But I just wonder if you would pray today, God, if I'm called to a specific group of people, would you make that clear to me? And I'd also invite you to join us in this calling of reaching families in central Indiana. We truly believe over the next 20 or 30 years that God wants to work through Connection Point to change city after city around central Indiana, to raise up a generation who are warriors of grace and truth. And we believe it'll absolutely change the state of Indiana, be a beacon for the gospel, could change the nation, could change history as we keep doing it Christ's way. But I love it that Paul had a specific calling to a specific group of people. I have that in my life, and thank you for all of you who are part of it with me. I'll see you tomorrow for more Daily Hope.